Welcome to Now and Forever, a series or a collection of 10-minute reflections on good news spirituality, brought to you or sponsored by the Charles and Catherine Free Family Foundation, brought to you from Our Lady of Sacred Heart Parish here in Watertown, New York. Hi, I'm Father Vincent Free. With me this evening is Vicki, as usual, and sitting in for Pat Henry is Dan DeVito. Dan, how you doing?
Good. How are you, Father?
Dan's a seminarian, so he ought to help us along if we have any come to different things here. In fact, we'll give him a good start. Dan, why don't you read that first paragraph?
You know, when it comes to making choices in life, countless variables do come into play. We can be limited by physical conditions like age or inclement weather, subject to laws like zoning ordinances, or just influenced by what other people might be thinking. The more important factor in reaching a vital decision, however, is found in the internal guidance system we call conscience. Given a well-informed and reliable conscience, external circumstances are merely incidental.
Very good. But let's talk about that word conscience. What does the word conscience really mean, or what's going on there? Conscience.
I think our conscience is where we come to make decisions on morality or really on any ethical issue that might come up in life. And conscience is very important, forming our conscience as well. Really obeying our conscience. I think after the Second Vatican Council, many theologians and of note, talked about the primacy of conscience, and I think that that's something that we're still developing and working on. And for each and every one of us, our conscience may be speaking to us in different ways, and it's important to obey that conscience because that's how God is speaking to us.
Very good. See, now, here's the key, I think, that this is important. Ready for this, Vicki? What's the Latin comes from conscience? Where does it come from? You didn't study that in school, did you? It means science, that's knowledge, and con is with, or together. So when you fashion a conscience, it's not just, you can't just think of yourself. You must create a conscience that involves you in a community of human beings. A real conscience that's sensitive and does what it's supposed to do requires you not just to think of your own actions. I hear my microphone. I do this all the time. Anyhow, it means to know together. In other words, that when you really fashion a good conscience, it's not just about what you may do right or wrong, but how that impacts on the rest of society. And that's...
But each person has their own individual conscience.
Absolutely.
What might bother me and my conscience might not be the same for someone else.
Correct. Yeah, each person, you have to be, it's not like there's, well, we'll probably go forward. Let's go forward. Why don't you read that next section here, see whether they give any, but I think conscience, the most important is knowledge, and that this sense that this knowledge has to be reliable. And, it's like they say that at first, the first principles are the ones that's the most important. The law of charity. When you examine your conscience, first principle, charity. Okay, let's see what we got in that next paragraph.
We can draw a comparison here to the makeup of culture. Much of its content has to do with optional issues like fashions, cuisine, language, schools, even political and economic systems. These aspects of human affairs can vary broadly without becoming immoral or oppressed or opposed to the natural law. However, even in these seemingly insignificant matters, one essential characteristic must be preserved. Culture exists in order to serve humanity. Jesus said as much even about the Sabbath observance. Man was not made for the Sabbath. The Sabbath was made for man. This means that we are neither above nor beneath the Sabbath. We are the very reason for it. The same principle applies to culture. Okay.
I think the thing here is that usually when you think about culture or what makes up culture, think about, all the different things of an ethnic group like cuisine, what do you eat and what kind of clothes you wear and so forth. But the real important things are that of values and principles and truths and goals and objectives and priorities. That's what makes up culture. And even like, an honest wage and how do you inherit what you've gained, or can you own property? Well, those are the key things. And marriage is another key, which is really shot to pieces now. And that's really the death of culture. There is no culture when you don't have those ways of doing it. But the thing that we're doing here with this conscience thing and in terms of culture, is that if we think about it, when we think about all these first principles that you have to observe, we're not above the culture, we're not beneath the culture. The culture must serve us, and if it doesn't, the heck with the culture. And I think people in the missions are much more aware of that, because we see some cultures that just ran out of time, and they become meaningless and empty and then there's like a collapse, it's like a nervous breakdown in those cultures, where the culture actually ends up that it's no longer applicable or just empty of meaning. And then you have a real crisis. It's happening in Africa in a number of countries, and I know in Papua New Guinea as well, where it's just, that's the nature of things. But some people try to preserve the culture, you know, like putting mud and pig grease on you isn't really a good thing today, you know, in terms of hygiene and lots of other reasons. But you don't want to do that.
No, and I think that links to what you said earlier about the whole community having a voice of conscience.
Yeah.
Because culture necessarily involves more than an individual. It's a whole group of people. So when that culture is not serving the entire community and it's not serving the common good, or is oppressing any group that we're called to love and, you know, the law of charity, then I think that's a time to move beyond the culture back to the, you know, and reevaluate what we're doing.
Okay, since you did so good with that first paragraph, Dan, why don't you do that one right there?
You know, in aiming to evangelize the culture and cultures of the world, we must keep first things first, addressing above all else what is opposed to basic morality, life issues, for example, and peace and justice concerns that pertain to human dignity. These are matters that form the social conscience of a nation. They need to be infused with gospel values in a vital way, in depth and right to the very roots.
That's evangelization in the modern world.
Yet we cannot neglect any aspect of the relationships of people among themselves and with God. As a matter of fact, things that contribute meaning and purpose to life are often found in the arts, leisure, entertainment, volunteer work, celebrations, and all aspects of family life. Bringing God into these affairs can do more towards achieving social justice than a frontal assault on secular agencies, such as when people attack Planned Parenthood. Evil is not attractive, life is, when it's worthwhile.
Oh, very good. I think that sums it up. We got a couple of minutes left. We can, the thing that jumps out to me on that thing is that infuse the culture with gospel values. See, that's we talk about rights. Everybody's talking about rights. But their rights, they correspond to not wants, but needs. I can want to be, center field for the Yankees. That's not a right. That's a want. But there are certain needs that have value, and those are the ones that must be preserved. And everybody just talks about rights. You have, when you talk about the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, those are basic issues. And then how you go about, achieving those ends depends that you pay attention to the values of everyone. Not just, talk about rights. Everybody got, everybody's a right to do all kinds of stupid things, but that's not true, especially if you talk about that social conscience, that it's not just, me, and I can figure out, as long as it's my conscience, I can do it. No, it doesn't quite work that way. Any final comments? Diane?
I think that what you said is important, and, even addressing those issues of peace and justice concerns, I think that's where the community conscience comes into being. So whether it's issues of a fair wage, like, you have the right to pay your employees what you want right now, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do. You're paying people below a living wage. So I think that's it's always important to take into account the needs of those at the bottom of society.
Anything strike you, Vicki?
No, just that each person usually has a limit and they know their conscience, and I think it's rooted from growing up and what they were taught and all that, and
that's where culture comes in.
And you have to live by it.
Yep. Okay, thanks for listening. We'll tune in next week. Please take care. God bless.